Welcome to the season 8 finale of Third Song In. We are finishing season 8 the way we started it, with a guest and a two-part episode. Enjoy this interview with our old friend, Doug Storm.
Doug Storm was one of the few people I knew in college that appeared to be comfortable in his own skin, even as a freshman. He was an impressive athlete. He was one of those big, handsome Midwestern boys who all the girls swooned over. And he played the same position I did. So, in some regards, he was competition. But at the same time, he was intelligent and really thoughtful and asked really odd questions sometimes. And he didn't have much interest in buying into the standard 80s college boy cliches. Looking back, I'd say that he was an iconoclast. Then I didn't really get it. But Storm recently ended a 9-year run as the host of a public interest radio show in Bloomington, Indiana. We are very happy to have him on the podcast. Welcome, Doug.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And kind words. I like the idea of being an iconoclast, though I would take issue with everything you said, probably.
Well, I thought that might be the case, but
Yeah.
it's funny when you think back to what you thought and how you felt about things when you were 18, 19, 20 years old. Off air, we were talking about how you get kind of locked into who you were at that age, and sometimes we don't mature enough. But I can just close my eyes and remember feeling the competition, feeling threatened, all the things that I think everybody, you probably felt the same way. I certainly know how I felt coming in as a freshman on that campus, but that's certainly how I felt. And I think a lot of people immediately, frankly, look to you as kind of a leader on the field, even though you were, an 18-year-old freshman coming in.
Man, that is hilarious to think about. Simply because, for the most part, I mean, that was probably the hardest experience. And this is a pathetic thing to say probably, but my hardest life experience to that point, other than maybe losing my girlfriend.
Yes. Yeah.
Which these are basic things, but being on a campus, going to a strange place, waking up in a strange place, having to do things that you hadn't done before, football being weird because it was, well, WashU football was a little weird in a lot of ways. And obviously, being a running back as a freshman, behind all-star running back Tom Polachek made it difficult to not want to, beat you, Tom Polachek,
Right, sure.
but not quite understanding what that meant. Like, I never sat on the bench a day in my life. Right. So, and this is a weird thing to try to comprehend. Now I was able to play special teams, and I did get in. I did play as a freshman, but the team was terrible.
Yes.
I mean, we just have to be frank. Most of the time, the team was terrible, and we had good games. Of course, Tom had good games. People had good games, but as a whole, the team was terrible. The coach suspect as well, if I had to be honest about that. Sorry, Fred.
Yeah, that's not the word starting with SU. I would have maybe said.
Right. Yeah. So those are weird, hard times that it's funny to think about me being comfortable in my own skin. So there was a girl or young woman at WashU who one time like accused me of being, and as a person I spent a fair amount of time with, accused me of being a snob, like stuck up and a snob. And I was like, I was a little offended by it, but at the same time, I could understand it because I generally kept to myself, even as kind of a weird introvert, extrovert, whatever that is on the scale somewhere. You can be an extrovert in certain situations, but generally, I prefer not to be bothered, which may be, a particular kind of temperament that definitely comes off as stuck up, right? As somebody
Sure.
who. So when you say comfortable in my own skin, I think I just was literally in a kind of, blinder space where I needed to go from point A to point B and not get lost. And I was scared most of the time. So, trying not to be scared is hard too. And trying not to come off as scared to everybody else who's so cool or so big or so, you're a kid becoming an adult and everybody else around you has 2, 3, 4 years on you.
Right.
and they're
Right.
adults, and you're like, oh my gosh, I just don't understand what this world is yet. And yeah, it was interesting, and
Well,
again,
and
terrible at the same time.
I'm sure I must have helped with that because I looked like an adult, but I didn't act like an adult at all. And
Dude, you
we
are a
were,
total anomaly throughout, I got to tell you.
yeah, we were roommates in the house, living with is
Yeah,
it
yeah.
Kurt we lived with?
We
Um,
lived with, did we live four in that room?
I think it was just three of
Or
us.
three?
I think the
So
most we would
I,
have
I
was
had
three.
to, I don't know if it was before you or after you, Hawk was in, James Hawkins was in there as well. So yeah, so it was you, me, and Kurt, and then I think
Yeah.
me, Kurt, and Hawk at that point. So yeah, I sort of swapped out rockers, I guess, in a sense, right?
That's true.
I mean, you're totally different
Headbangers.
people, but yeah, you were totally on the same level in that space, at least.
That's funny.
Yeah,
But I
interesting.
do, it's a great way to describe you because there's a lot of people that overcompensate by, being apparently comfortable in their skin. But you definitely had a quality that was unique for your youth at that time. And I remember always being impressed with you. I mean, we'd have some hilarious times and do some stupid ass stuff.
Oh,
But
definitely.
because I mean, you shared some of your fear a little bit. I learned a lot about what it was like to, like, it was weird to think of you as a farm kid. But you
Right.
talked,
Because you came from a small
yeah.
town, right?
Yeah, yeah, very small. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about the fact that one of the things is because I deal with it now is I have a stepdaughter who's a Duke, and all of the kids, I mean not all, but so many of the kids are so wealthy, like at a level that you can barely comprehend.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a similar type of feel at WashU, but I remember you weren't doing it on purpose, but you were sort of educating me to the fact that you may have appeared to be wealthy, but your family, I think mostly were farmers, and there's a lot that they could write off. So it appeared, so you didn't. I don't know. It's just it was eye opening, even though I felt that I was progressing up and learning about people in life. I was still a pretty sheltered person even when I left WashU, and you helped me a lot, even though you were younger than me.
Well, I think the goal is to fit in generally, right? So
Right.
you had to appear to be like everyone else in a lot of ways. And interestingly, I think Hawk would sort of provide another kind of socioeconomic clash at WashU, right? So there's definitely that situation. I always probably, and this again is part of maybe just like I'm trying to deny that stuck up, snobby, conceited ego part of myself, which is clearly there, right? Like it's a way in which you try to defend yourself against those things that you know are not great when you deal
Yeah.
with other people because it comes off or you're trying to always like, okay, don't be Mr. Know-it-all or don't be because they're just ways in which your personality comes out. And I try to defend myself against it, but I got to tell you, I was telling Tom, my mom gave me, I saw her this weekend. She gave me clippings from Wash U that my grandmother had kept. And I'll give you a quick note on my heritage or my background, my socioeconomic background as well. My grandparents on my mother's side my grandfather was a carpenter. My grandparents on my dad's side were farmers. And then my dad was a farmer. My
Mhm.
mom was a librarian in school. She went back to school to get an MLS, while she was at work, while she, I mean, crazy that she was able to do it, drive to an hour away, go to classes, drive back, have kids, go to work. And probably from say 6th grade on, I wanted to be wealthy. And I don't mean wealthy, I just mean fit in with wealthy people. And that's
Right.
so I never want, and this is another strange thing. I never want to be wealthy. I've never wanted to be wealthy. I've never wanted to have money. I've never wanted to have great things. I like having the things I have and I like having not to suffer through trying to figure out how to eat and live where I live. And, those kinds of things are just what everybody wants for themselves anyway. So I've always just wanted to not worry about life. That's naive, of course, but that way in which
Yeah. Good
you
luck.
just want to not worry about the things that you have to deal with. And never in my life did I think being wealthy would change that worry or change
Right.
that equation. But I came from, and I wasn't even close to well off. I mean, at the time that I was in college, I mean, we didn't own any of the land really that my dad farmed. The bank owned all the land, so you're struggling to pay inputs, out of your crop. I don't know at the time if they had much of a crop insurance program. So, a bad year is a really bad year, and then you're out of luck. So I think it's an interesting thing to try to at least dress the part, right? Like you wear your Nike or Lacoste pullover or whatever,
Right,
you put the
right.
collar up, you wear boat shoes, whatever everybody else is doing to not look like you can't afford to do that. And my parents helped me with that, obviously. I mean, my mom wanted me to always fit in. My dad didn't care really. He probably didn't like spending money. But I went far afield, which is usually the case in situations like this. But I was trying to deny my stuck upness. But in this bunch of clippings that my grandmother saved, and she hadn't put into a like an album. Now she had made me an album of football clippings. So all my greatest high school hits and college hits in a binder with a nifty little cutout from a newspaper article. And I'm from a small town against Shelbyville, Illinois. At the time, 4,900 people maybe.
Yeah, that's what I
And
thought.
yeah, but I lived actually out in the country and the place, my address was Lakewood, Illinois, which didn't have 250 people around there. At one point, it did have a post office and a little store, but that went away.
So it
So
was suburban Shelbyville is what it
suburban Shelby, that's right. That's right. Um,
was.
so this, I'll show it to you you guys so you can see the headline. I think you can see it maybe. So this article, I'll share this with you guys later. But this article proves that I am the same person I've always been, and that I am arrogant and have a ridiculous ego, and it's hard to avoid knowing that about like when you look at this, you're like, oh man, what a jerk, right? You
Yeah,
read, oh man, you're such a jerk. Yeah.
I've been exposed. All that stuff I said about you is bullshit. You
Yeah, totally. You know what? I think
are.
I would like to say that going to college sort of put that in check, right? Then you have to realize that you, again, are not in the same place you were before. There are many people just like you, Tom Polachek being one, Chris Derrickson. We are people that are similar in lots of ways. We have the same successes or failures. We can tell the same kinds of stories. We come from the same backgrounds. We have the same egos frequently. We're hiding the same fears.
Yeah, yeah.
And you just end up, I think, hopefully recognizing that enough that maybe when you get out of that space, you can then sort of jettison a lot of the crap that comes with college and keep that core of sort of recognizing, the sameness of a lot of us within those, hopefully, again, recognized differences. A problem with WashU probably is that it was not very different. Like, most of
Right.
us were the same. And
Yeah, we talked a little bit
yeah, I
about
joined a
that.
fraternity that was people that were the same
Yeah.
as me. So
True.
the only differences were probably, well, probably mostly religious differences or
Religious, geographic,
definitely
accents,
geographic. Yeah.
But you're right. A lot of us kind of seem to be cut out of the same mold. I will
Totally.
say though that the thing that struck me about you, even as a freshman, but certainly after I got to know you better into your sophomore year, which was my senior year, is that you didn't generally engage in the same kind of conversations that the rest of us did. And that's where I think the iconoclast Doug Storm appeared to me was you would talk about things and bring up things that were certainly off my way of thinking in general. Lots of times questioning things that I didn't question, or just challenging things. Frankly, it felt like for the hell of it. And
Likely
I think
true.
maybe it was for the hell of
Yeah,
it.
likely true. Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is, looking at my screen right now and looking at the very short bio you gave us to kind of prepare for this. I mean, you became this. You did other things, and you're doing other things, but you became a radio host. And I've listened to and read the descriptions of the shows that you've done, and you did 9 years of radio, right?
Yeah.
you use that's what has kind of held fast as you've gone through, because I've listened to a couple episodes, I've looked at these summaries. You're asking all kinds of questions that
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily even occur to me, but certainly show that you're willing to challenge yourself in that way. And it's interesting that that part of you as an 18-year-old seems to have been one of the through lines. Along with,
Yeah,
you know, you could say you're still arrogant or you're this or you're that, but the reality is I think that's more the core of who you were, or at least what everybody saw in you when you were young.
well, that's an interesting thing, that, like, I wouldn't have been able to say that about myself. So I think that's nice to say, or it's nice to say that those particular qualities made the radio make sense, and the show in particular that I did fit with my own, obviously, personality. I think a lot of what we, at least I wanted to do, was not stop thinking about things. I think it's hard to think about things. And that's a stupid thing to say. But what I mean is that, you've got your life to live and you've got your kids. If you have kids, again, we've talked about, hardships. It's very, very difficult to really try to engage with the way the world works in a way that's fruitful for yourself, let alone trying to understand anything, right? Trying to put anything to practice, trying to make sense of why things don't make sense, right?
Right.
And also come to realize just how stupid you are every single damn day, right? Like
Yeah.
that's for me was, and again, it's not like I speak out of borrowed intelligence, right? Now I'm not gonna. It's no false humility to say I can read a book and I can think with the book. I'm not stupid generally. I'm stupid about a lot of things, and or ignorant might be the right way to say it.
Yeah.
Like, but you have the capacity to read a book, think about it, ask questions, and hopefully educate yourself a little bit better than before, and take that knowledge forward. Take those questions that you got answers for in a particular context with a particular guest about a particular book, and move it into the next program. It may not be at all like the last program, but you build that knowledge forward, always able to sort of bring another question from a past space into the present and get more answers, or more words. They're not always answers. They're just people thinking about things, right? And you keep putting them all together and hope at some point there's a decent answer in there somewhere, or a place to settle and think, okay, which direction can we go now using that same knowledge? And how much of it do we have to change with the next interview, the next book, the next thought, right? You got to change all the time when you're trying to engage different people on different topics.
Right.
And if you're always trying to shoehorn the topic into your expectations, into your worldview, which is all we see now, right? Everybody's got a worldview, and it's generally a horrible one. And every conversation they have is framed by that worldview, and every conversation they have exists in the echo chamber, on, really, I would say, on both sides, but I don't mean that really. There are echo chambers on the left, and there aren't. Let me change that. There are echo chambers in the liberal media. There isn't a left media for the most part in this country. There are left people, and there are left media people, and there are left social media people, etc. But it's very rare that you will come across one. Even the ones like the Majority Report with Sam Cedar I listened to. So that's a left-leaning podcast, radio show. It's been around for 20 plus years, which is amazing in itself.
Oh, man.
But they're still pretty mainstream, right? They're still pretty liberal in the main. So trying to sort of combat this space where we have to sort of fight against ourselves. I'm left, I'm liberal, versus, you're right, you're conservative, you're autocratic, I'm trying to be democratic, and trying to understand how we live our lives, and generally have the way we live our lives often has nothing to do with politics, right? Like, we don't live these
Usually, yeah.
politics normally. We need to eat, sleep, be happy with ourselves, be happy with our family, try to find ways to get through the world. And politics gets in the way of it all the time. So, for me, that's what the show has done, and sort of coming from perhaps like a smart ass space, where you're just trying to mess with people by asking questions that they can't answer or that they never thought about before. does take you to this, let's be sincere about this. I am asking a smart ass question, but have you thought about that?
That's the
Does
Doug Storm I remember.
that's it. Yeah, that's totally it. So it's me
And
trying to not be a smart ass. Yeah, yeah.
by the way, it occurred to me as I was thinking about this episode and getting a chance to talk to you after a very long time, that there was a point, and it was probably, I'm sure it was before my kids were born. It was probably 25 years ago. I got an email from you out of the blue.
I was gonna bring this up myself.
Were you? Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because we hadn't talked at that point for 10 years probably. And I have to admit, I don't remember the specifics of the email. All I remember was that it was a question that related to me as a practicing attorney in general. And I don't think it necessarily was intended this way, but it was kind of like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Or at least that's how I took away from it. And I didn't know how to respond. And I think I just gave you some milk toast bullshit answer. And maybe my daughter was born, because I think I may have said something like, yeah, I got a lot of shit going on, man. And that was it.
Yeah.
But that's also the Doug I remember. And that's not a whole lot different than 20-year-old Doug Storr.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably. So I don't remember I don't remember who I sent it to. Clearly, I sent it to you, but I did spend a little time trying to. Well, I wouldn't say trying to be a writer, but trying to think about being a writer, which is basically what I do. It's why the radio has worked out for me. I just have to read and talk, and I don't, and that isn't as hard as writing, right? So I was
I
trying
think
to
Chris
be.
and I could relate to that statement,
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah, yeah. I was trying to be a writer, and one of the things I was trying to think about, and this actually was prompted by a high school girl that I ran into at a bookstore once, and this was, this wasn't too late in life, but maybe I was 28, something like that, right? And I ran into her. So this is, a good 10 years since I'd really talked to her. Ran into her at this bookstore, started talking, and I may I'm I made a joke that I shouldn't have made probably. I mean, it was probably related to high school, right? Right. And I don't even remember what it was, but I'm probably going to guess it was related to a body part of hers. But I didn't, and I hope it wasn't terrible. I hope it was like kind of a subtle joke, but it probably wasn't. And
Right.
because for me, she existed in a way that she existed in high school. And this is what we were talking about before, how do you grow up? How do you move past these things? Clearly, I hadn't quite moved past them at 28. But she looked at me and she said, same old Doug. And so when we're talking about these things and you bring this up, and you say, oh, this is the Doug Storm I knew at 18, 19, 20, it's a little bit dispiriting, but I do feel like that it is the person I've cobbled stuff onto, that you've tried to at least expand that self into being a little different, a little bit more open to things. But I do recognize that, and having to sort of check yourself within those spaces that you fall back into those identities, right? That you're with the person in high school, they're just like the person that you saw 10 years ago. They're not different to you at all. You're not different at all. Even whatever life experience you have hasn't changed how you feel about yourself or how you think you are in the world, how you look to people, how they look to you. All these things sort of just suck you right back into the place you were before. And in that particular email, I was imagining writing an article in which I explored that, right? Who you are and how it's stultifying, right? How it keeps you in this space, and you don't mean to do it, right? So I didn't mean to say what I said to her. You know what I mean? Things just come
Right, it
out,
just came
right?
out.
And that's generally how brains work. You're not even a real person. Like, you're a body. Your brain does what it does. Your brain's doing so many things you're not aware of, right? All the time, all the time. And this thing we call a self is just this thing that's a mask on top of this other thing that you can't understand at all. So your goal in knowing thyself is to know that it's pretty much a mask all the time. The stability of the mask is something you may want to focus on. How do I continue? Like, we think about it as being a non, like, you don't have to try to be stable as a person, although this is not true for a lot of people. But it is really just a thing that was sort of layered onto you as you grew up. Experiences, create reactions. Reactions get feedback. Feedback makes you happy to continue that way or not. Run this direction if that feedback is terrible. Put on a different face for this person. That one works, so I'm going to keep it. Did it work over here? I'm not saying you reflect on this consciously, because I don't think
Yeah.
we do.
Right. At least
But
not usually. Right?
your brain does. What's keeping me safe? What's keeping me happy? What's keeping me fed? What's keeping me emotionally satisfied? And then I'm going to keep doing those things over and over and over. That's why we get trapped in those repetitions. Even as they harm us, we keep doing
Right.
So I'm going to take us back to the radio show in a second here, but
Yeah.
I want to say one of the things that I guess take it as a compliment, but
I'm a
what
little
we
worried
all
about it.
and then what we all see, you talk about, you know, the dumb things that you are at 20 or whatever you are, but you and Tom, I think, have mostly been really, really stable. Like, I went through a very unstable, is that what the word I want? Unstable period through college and spent years trying to rebuild, you know, what I tore down myself to the point, and I'm going to bring up Joe Pay. I saw Joe Pay, shit, I don't remember where it was, but it was like right before my daughter was going to be born. And he made this comment. He's like, dude, I cannot imagine you as a dad. And I was like, fuck you. And I was like, because Joe hadn't seen me in 10 or 15
Yeah.
years. So he
Right.
only
Right.
had the image that I was, where I was working so hard to be something very different than that. So whatever. I've
Yeah.
always seen you in like as in the most positive of lights, and you've only built upon that foundation. So on the
Really
radio
appreciate
show, I also want to say thank you to you for you sent me an episode. Was it Epilogue? I think it
it.
was.
Yeah, the show I pondered doing.
Yeah, you pondered to doing it, but it was great. Is with a local historian who wrote about American socialism and communism, and basically the conflict where religion made
Yeah.
sure to push that out of our culture. And what it's done is it's reinvigorated my belief in studying history, which because you talked about hearing other voices and learning and growing. I got to a point where I could not stand to listen to the right or the conservatives. And I just turned it all off. I just put myself
Yeah.
into a shell. But I feel like I can find some sort of refuge in history because I think that's why I gravitated towards it in the first place. So thank
Yeah.
you. On a very weird note, I mean, did you do, because Tom and I haven't done a goddamn thing to prepare to be podcasters. Like we just showed up. You have such a professional sounding voice. Did you do any training? Did you, was this all natural to you or
All natural,
what?
apparently. Yeah, to
Okay.
sound like a know-it-all asshole just came natural. You guys have already told me this, right?
Well,
It's
it's the
perfect for the
thing
radio.
is on the radio, the episodes that I listen to, your radio
Yeah.
show, you sound very professional.
Oh, yeah.
And even now you do. The longer we talk, the more I can kind of, I'm like, oh, yes, this is Doug. But it actually didn't sound like you to me initially. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chris and
my
I
radio
talked about
voice.
it. We're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
God damn, how do you end up sounding so professional? Because we have
Yeah, it's the
not figured
radio
that
voice.
shit out
Yeah,
yet.
Well,
yeah.
remember real quick, we had this guy come into Schmeezings where Tom and I worked in college.
Nice.
And he worked at the rock station that was just down the road. I think it was Jimmy Page is the stage name he went by, but I can't
Oh,
remember.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he'd come into the bar and he'd be talking to us and he'd say something about being on the radio. I'm like, yeah, bullshit. And then he'd go into his radio voice. Like it was almost a totally different voice than his real
That's
voice. I'm
funny.
like, oh shit. That must be weird to have to talk in that voice
Yeah,
all the time. But
yeah.
so I didn't know if, like Tom said,
Hopefully
I
that's
listened
not
to it and
how
I'm
I
like,
sound. Yeah.
no, but you sound
Okay.
incredibly you sound like a professional radio person,
Well,
which is cool.
I'll say this, that there's definitely a persona voice that happens to me in those introductions, right? So when I went to the radio in the first place, it was generally because I had been listening to podcasts and they had been pissing me off. In the sense that you would argue with people in your head, right? You'd be like, what? Why are they making that point? Why are they focusing on that? Why is that the answer? That doesn't make any sense. Or why did they skip to this answer that they didn't earn in the discussion? So I would always be just annoyed at podcasts, and even the ones people loved at the time, like This American Life, or I think Radio Lab was in its kind of first bloom of everybody loving, and I'd be so angry about the particular political answer that wasn't called political. Like it was definitely an ideological answer. It was definitely an economic answer. And it was made in a way that you're like, but you've not talked about X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G along the way, and you're not earning that. Yeah, you should do micro loans in Africa. Like, no, I mean, there are a lot of reasons maybe to do that. There are a lot of reasons not to do that. So I just got annoyed all the time. And so because of that, I looked up, we had just moved to the town, Bloomington, and I was like, what can I do to be involved in a way that I hadn't been involved anywhere else in my life? I just, you shouldn't say I've just been a dad, just been a father. It's, those kinds of things are important things we all do. But I wanted to do something community oriented. I'd never really done anything community oriented. And it turned out that I really didn't do much community oriented. I just made a radio show for myself. It happened to be on a community radio station,
Right.
but I went in first trying to write op-eds for the local newspaper. And I really never made much headway there. And I got in an argument with the editor a couple of times. So I never got my letters printed after that. But I went to the radio station just to sort of find out about it. They had orientation. So I went to an orientation meeting. I said, "Oh, I'll volunteer. I'll try to learn stuff, figure out what goes on here." Not really yet thinking what they'd even allow me to do. I mean, it's got a list of programs already. It's got its things it does. If you're a volunteer, you're basically probably going to be helping with production or working, sitting at the front desk, for a long time trying to figure out if you're going to be able to figure out the music, the radio board, the studio board, so you can help if you need to sit in for a news radio, a news program, anything like that. You can be on the music side or the news side. I chose the public affairs side, and basically just said, I'm interested in making a show at some point. And the news manager at the time, news director at the time said, well, can you make one in about a week? And I said, I've never made one before, but sure.
Yeah, what the hell?
Why not give it a try? Yeah, okay, sure. It can't be that hard. I mean, it really is you need the equipment. You need the ability. And since the radio
Right.
station's there's the equipment. And I needed, obviously, a guest. And to be honest, what I discovered very early is you can pretty much ask anyone to be a guest and they'll say yes, especially academics. So my goal was to create basically a literature show, because that's what I knew at the time. I didn't have to stretch too far there.
Mhm.
That was my degree, etc. So I ended up making a summer series that I called the Custom House, which nobody understood that name, and most people thought it was a do-it-yourself home show, like how to do things in your home, which I can't do any of that. But it was a kind of Hawthorne Melville reference, So
Gotcha.
anyway, so I did the show. Literally within a week, I had a demo of one conversation about a Melville story with a Melville scholar here at IU, and that passed muster with the News and Public Affairs Committee. And I did it for a summer. And at the end of that, they were like, "Okay, now we need a producer for Interchange." And I was like, "I don't know what that means. I don't, how do you produce a show?" I mean, I produced my show, but Interchange at the time was a rotating host program, had 5 hosts, and they rotated every week.
And that was a
And
show that had been around for a while, right?
yeah, it existed already. So Interchange that I took over had existed many years it was one of the first public affairs programs that were on WFHB, and so I was sort of inheriting, I guess I was going to say legend, but I don't mean that. I'm losing the word because I'm 56, and you guys are older,
Yeah,
suckers.
it gets worse, by the
Yeah,
Yeah.
way.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but it'd been around a long time, and you sort of inherit it's kind of the flagship public affairs program. And at the time, it had sort of gone through a slack period because nobody seemed to want to do it, and the people that were doing it were the people that the radio station paid to be there, which was the news director and the news the assistant news director were doing interviews along with 3 other people that had been doing it for a fairly long time, and I think we're kind of tired of doing it.
Right.
So asking me to produce produce it was to ask me to manage those people who didn't really want to do the show anymore, and they're all volunteers except for the paid people who wanted to stop doing it because they get paid to do their actual job, not host a radio show that's a volunteer show. And that became very difficult because people are asked to produce a program on the air that's live. It was live at the time. So you'd have to make sure people were prepping appropriately, make sure they booked a guest, make sure that they were going to have their guests come in, make sure the guest knew they were going to come in, make sure what time it was going to happen, make sure the station was ready to go. If you had a problem, make sure you knew what to do if there was a problem. If they ended up being late, what were you going to do? All these kind of things you're like to try to produce and try to have some coherence to that as well. In the end, I got very tired of that because you can't force people to do those things that you'd like them to do and or you think are the right things to do to prepare for that, right? If they get there on time with the guest, that's okay. They did it, right? And even if it's a show you thought was boring or irrelevant, or I mean, this is just you making your own personal response to this, right? But it was okay. It got on the air and it was local, right? But I wanted to learn more, do more. And selfishly, I just said, I'll do this. I'll do as much as I can to get better at it. Doing it once in a 5-person rotation, you stay bad at it. And I don't mean that badly for other people, but you just don't grow. You don't grow.
Was it a weekly show then? So it was like every 5 weeks you'd be up kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's impossible to kind of really get your footing or to try to learn to do different things. And you kind of forget from one week to the other what you learned about that one week. And so people started to want to quit. And I was like, that's fine. I don't need to replace you. I'll just do your show. Right? Which is, again, that's the ego, right? You're like, I can do this, no problem. And I did have a woman I worked with for a couple of months, maybe 3 or 4 months, who was pretty good as a partner. Like we were kind of an NPR type show partnership.
Yeah,
you had that kind of back and forth female, male voice, and it definitely had an NPR sound to it. And at the time, I was also reading the news on the daily. Yeah, it was a daily newscast we had, so I read on Mondays, and I kind of got stuck in that news voice, probably like trying to.
I can picture you reading the news, or I should say, listen to you. I can hear it in my head.
Yeah, so that voice just became a default, and it's not far off from my Thurston Howell, as long as it's the color of money.
Lovey.
Oh yeah. So that voice kind of just carried over into the introductions of the show, which I tried to be very, very I tried to be smart. Like if you read those introductions, that guy thinks he's pretty smart, and that guy's working hard to sound pretty smart and funny and insightful on about 3 minutes and 30 seconds, right? But that's where that came. That's just a product of those experiences, and then really kind of getting stuck in that. Like I don't know how it would sound different now. Right. Occasionally it's been a while, but I've recorded a few books for audiobooks, and it's some of them, if they're just nonfiction, I get stuck in that voice. And that's not the best voice for long form. You need some variety, and I definitely never wanted to do the This American Life voice. It's just who it is. And when I'm interviewing, I don't think I sound like that voice at all. Right. So the voice at the beginning of the show becomes a very different voice. When you click into the actual interview, you're like, oh, is this a different person?
It's funny you say that, because even, I recorded a little bit of a cold open before you got on. And it part of it, I guess, comes from reading, because I was reading it as opposed to speaking it. But I can hear it in my own head. I have a different voice with you. So I understand what you're saying, that it kind of depends on the context of what you're doing.
Yeah.
By the way, I just want to interrupt for just a second and point out that this is the podcast you go to if you want a Gilligan's Island reference. I was looking at 3 gray-haired guys. I'm like, there's a reason we have a limited audience.
what became clear to me is that I'm not ever going to have that audience that you really want to reach if you think you're bringing good content to the platform, right? You're not, like, it's easy to bring stupid content to the platform. It's easy to make easy may be the wrong word, but clearly, as there are any number of TikTokers out there with millions upon millions of followers, you recognize that people aren't ingesting quality, thoughtful content. And for me, I've always just wanted, when I started to do the show, it was honestly about learning more. It was about just taking my time to learn more and share that with other people. They would hopefully go learn more. And one of the things that I was saying about Radiolab or This American Life that for me was a bother was that it seemed like they tied it up with a bow at the end always. You've learned what you need to learn about this particular topic. This is the This American Life answer. This is the Radiolab answer. And for me, I just wanted to always say, dang, man, there's so much out there that complicates every stinking thing you think about, and you know nothing about anything. And it's just apparent every time you open a book that takes the time to think about something in a very open way that goes to sources you've not heard of before, that isn't ideological. And ideology is a human thing, right? That's how we think. Like, again, we talked about it before. You put yourself in a box and your box stays the way it is. That's your ideology, and that's what your brain uses to go forward. Okay, breaking that down is necessary for all of us to be open to those new conversations, those new ideas, and to recognize that we're wrong about most things. There's a great song by I know we're into the song place, but there's a great song by Dan Byrne. You probably couldn't play on the radio. Generally, it's called Hannibal, and I should, you know what? I should have recommended this, but now I'm recommending it. So, but it's not part of the playlist. Sorry, but there's a line in it that says, "I learned all I know from my dad, and he learned it all from his, and they just happen to be wrong about everything." Right? And so that's the
That's
literal truth
awesome.
of most
Yeah.
of our thinking
Right.
in this environment in particular. In really in this mediated environment, it's 1,000 times worse than just your dad and his dad telling you the things that are wrong. Now, anywhere you look, somebody's telling you wrong stuff. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was a stupid comic book podcast. But the hosts they talked about, it's basically part of what you said, which was they were getting advice from somebody about generating their content, and they said, we've been told negativity generates engagement.
Oh, totally, man. Yeah.
And that's what, you weren't doing in your radio show, what we certainly try not to do in this podcast, and that would explain the 50 listeners per episode, that we're dealing with. Because that's the last thing you want to do. There's plenty of that out there.
Yeah, oh my God. You got to be salacious or negative, or
Right.
have barely any clothes on.
I was willing to try it.
You were willing, yeah.
I wasn't sure
what
I wasn't sure what kind of audience it would bring in for us.
I just want to quickly point out, and I'll do this in the playlist section too. But when you make 9 years of radio, that you think that isn't about you. I just want to be clear, and I'm not saying this is a knock on anything about us or about the things we want to talk about, because anybody's voice that brings culture to other people, that introduces new ways to look at the world, that new things at all. Playlists are great with that, because I hadn't heard that before, and I'd like to listen to that and expand that. For me, what's sad about the radio show is that it's 9 years and it's just not there anymore.
Yeah.
And for me, I made the show, and it's a stupid word people use, evergreen, right? Like, you want it to be always worth listening to, even if it happened 12 years ago. The show on wind power, 12 years, one of my first shows, it's not that it's old. I mean, it is old, but it's not a topic that needs to go away or should go away, right? Like, there's always something to learn, maybe new things that have happened, but I always want things to be available for a listener, for someone to come on to and say, this is an interesting direction to go in, or I had no idea about the cocaine wars in China and how the U.S. basically did all that.
Well, And that's what it's not 100% true because your episodes are available.
No, the station is small, so the server space is limited.
Gotcha.
And generally, they went through when I was going to use the word purge, but I don't mean it that way. But they went through a period where they wanted to, and still do, I think, restrict content to like 5 years of archival content. Now, I think a lot of it is still available on PRX, was the exchange site PRX. So
is there something we can plug though so that people could hear the older shows that are available? Is there something can we direct somebody to a website?
Yeah, well, so again, on PRX, it's hard to search it, but on PRX, if you just put in WFHB and interchange on the prx.org search box, I think that'll get you to the WFHB interchange site. And there are something like 400 or so shows there.
And there is where we have arbitrarily decided to end part 1 of our interview with radio broadcaster and old friend Doug Storm. We will continue this interview in part 2 of our season finale. We'll tip our hat to Spinal Tap, and we're going to urge you to tune in next week because this season goes to 11. Part 2 of our interview with Doug will drop on September 1, 2025 as episode 11 of season 8.
Third Song In is recorded in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Joliet, Illinois, and Bloomington, Indiana.
You can email us at thirdsongin@gmail.com. Please send us your questions, your comments, your suggestions. We'd love to hear from you.
Check out our website, thirdsonginpodcast.com. We'll have episode spotlights for each episode, little videos. There's a blog that Tom and I do every other week. All the various recommendations we make on the show, and also more information about Doug and where you can find his stuff.
Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcast. Rate and review the podcast. Give us all your motherfucking stars. Please tell people about the podcast and share it if you can. Finally, again, we'd like to say thanks to Doug Storm. It's nice to see that he's using his powers for good and not evil. Look for his interchange shows on the archives of PRX. Search for Interchange WFHB on prx.org. You've been listening to part 1 of the finale of season 8 of Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek. Thanks for listening, and come back for part 2. Welcome to the season 9 finale of Third Song In, where we welcome
Stop. Season 8 finale.
Oh, shit. I wrote season 9. Fucking dummy.
As noted. Fuck. Why am I saying
That's
as
me.
noted? No, that's fine.
Pursuant to the notation,